The morning sun had barely climbed above the skyline when a single sentence spoken as an innocent joke changed two lonely lives forever. No one inside the crowded downtown cafe imagined that the exhausted father wearing faded work clothes and carrying a little girl's backpack would unknowingly make the city's most respected CEO smile for the first time in years. Even fewer could have guessed that the strangers laughing quietly at his awkward comment would later discover that kindness has a way of rewriting destinies. Sometimes the smallest words, spoken without pride or expectation, become the beginning of miracles that money can never buy. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who still believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to HeartNest Tales because every story here reminds us that hope often arrives when life seems darkest. Arlen Hayes had never imagined becoming both mother and father before turning 35. 3 years earlier, a sudden illness had taken his wife, leaving him with 6-year-old Maris and a mountain of responsibilities that never seemed to shrink. Every morning began before sunrise. He packed lunches, braided his daughter's hair after watching dozens of online tutorials, cleaned their tiny apartment, and rushed to his construction job before dropping Maris at school. Every evening he returned home with aching muscles, only to cook dinner, help with homework, wash clothes, and read bedtime stories while pretending everything was going to be all right. The hardest part was never the physical exhaustion. It was smiling every day so his daughter would never carry the weight of his fears. Bills arrived faster than paychecks. The apartment roof leaked whenever it rained. Their old car had stopped working months before, forcing Arlen to rely on buses that rarely arrived on time. Yet despite every hardship, Maris believed her father could fix anything. To her, he was stronger than superheroes because superheroes never packed school lunches or remembered favorite bedtime songs. Across the city, Celeste Rowan lived a life many people envied. As the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, she appeared on magazine covers, business podcasts, and charity galas. Newspapers described her as brilliant, fearless, and unstoppable. What they never mentioned was the silence waiting for her every evening inside her beautiful penthouse. Success had filled her calendar but emptied her personal life. Years of betrayal, fake friendships, and relationships built around wealth had convinced her that genuine human connection was becoming impossible to find. On one bright Tuesday morning, Celeste decided to escape the endless meetings for a quiet breakfast at a neighborhood cafe she had secretly loved since college. She wore simple clothes without expensive jewelry, hoping no one would recognize her. She wanted one peaceful hour without cameras or business conversations. At almost the same moment, Arlen rushed into the same cafe after realizing Maris had forgotten her lunchbox at home. He planned to grab a quick sandwich before catching the next bus to her school. The cafe was crowded, and the only available seat happened to be across from Celeste's table. Embarrassed, he politely asked if he could sit there for just a few minutes. She nodded with a warm smile. Maris, who had accompanied her father after missing the school bus, watched the elegant woman curiously. Children often notice loneliness hidden behind confident faces. As Celeste complimented Maris's colorful hair ribbons, the little girl proudly announced that her father had learned to tie them himself even though he used to make them look like tangled ropes. Everyone nearby laughed gently, including Celeste. Arlen scratched his head with playful embarrassment before saying that he had practiced so much that maybe one day he could even help brides get ready for weddings. Looking at Celeste's graceful appearance, he joked with an innocent smile that she would probably make a wonderful bride someday. Without hesitation, Celeste smiled back and quietly replied that she would simply need a groom for that. The conversation lasted only a few seconds, yet something invisible shifted between them. It was not romance born from appearance or status. It was recognition. Two adults carrying different kinds of loneliness had accidentally seen each other without pretending. Neither of them knew several customers had recognized Celeste and quietly whispered about the unlikely exchange. Some laughed at the construction worker's confidence, assuming he had embarrassed himself in front of one of the country's wealthiest executives. Arlen remained completely unaware of her identity. He thanked her for sharing the table, wished her a peaceful day, grabbed Maris's lunch, and hurried toward the bus stop. Later that afternoon, One of Celeste's assistants mentioned that the man from the cafe worked for a subcontractor renovating an old community center partially funded by her company. Curious about the father who seemed richer in love than many millionaires, Celeste decided to visit the construction site without announcing her arrival. She found Arlen carrying heavy materials while patiently helping a younger worker learn a difficult task instead of criticizing him for mistakes. During lunch break, he shared half of his meal with an elderly security guard who had forgotten his own food. Nobody asked him to do these things. Kindness had simply become his habit. Over the following weeks, Celeste found reasons to support the renovation project more closely. Sometimes she brought supplies for the workers. Sometimes she discussed plans with engineers. Every visit revealed another quiet act of generosity from Arlen. He stayed late to repair playground equipment so neighborhood children could play safely. He secretly collected money among co-workers to help an injured laborer pay rent. He never spoke about these actions because he believed goodness lost value when performed for attention. Meanwhile, Maris quickly grew comfortable around Celeste. During occasional visits, the little girl proudly showed her school drawings and asked endless questions about business, buildings, and dreams. Celeste, who had never expected children to become part of her carefully organized life, found herself smiling more often than she had in years. Still, rumors spread throughout the company. Some executives questioned why their CEO invested so much time in a simple community project. Others assumed Arlen was trying to impress a wealthy woman for financial gain. The whispers eventually reached him through another worker. Feeling embarrassed and worried that his reputation might damage Celeste's professional image, Arlen decided to distance himself completely. He politely declined invitations connected to company events and focused only on finishing his work. The sudden distance confused Maris, who missed seeing the woman who always encouraged her to dream bigger than their circumstances. Celeste noticed immediately. Rather than becoming offended, she quietly investigated the reason. When she learned about the rumors, disappointment filled her heart. She realized that people who measured every relationship by money could never understand a friendship built on simple respect. Instead of confronting gossip with anger, she chose action. Several months later, the renovated community center opened with a public celebration. Local families, volunteers, journalists, and company representatives gathered beneath bright afternoon sunshine. Arlen attended wearing his only formal suit, slightly worn but carefully pressed. Maris held his hand proudly. During her speech, Celeste thanked investors, architects, volunteers, and employees. Then she surprised everyone by asking Arlen to join her on stage. The crowd watched in complete silence. She spoke about leadership, explaining that the world often celebrates people who build companies while overlooking those who quietly build communities. She described how one father had taught an entire organization that compassion creates stronger foundations than concrete. Without mentioning his personal struggles, she honored his integrity, humility, and unwavering devotion to raising his daughter with dignity despite overwhelming hardship. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Many of the same people who had laughed inside the cafe months earlier now lowered their eyes with regret. Then came another surprise. Celeste announced the launch of a nationwide scholarship and family assistance program inspired by single parents who sacrifice everything for their children. The initiative would begin with the renovated community center and expand across the country. She invited Arlen to serve as its community director, not because of business experience, but because authentic compassion cannot be taught inside boardrooms. Arlen stood speechless. For years he had believed survival was his only goal. Suddenly someone believed his life experiences could become hope for thousands of struggling families. Maris wrapped both arms around her father, unable to understand every detail, but recognizing that something beautiful had happened. The following year transformed both of their lives. Arlen accepted the position while continuing to live modestly. He refused unnecessary luxury, choosing instead to improve community programs, create after-school activities, organize food drives, and mentor young fathers facing the same fears he once carried alone. Celeste also changed. She reduced endless business travel, spent more weekends volunteering, and discovered that success felt far more meaningful when measured by lives changed instead of profits earned. Their friendship slowly deepened through shared purpose rather than grand romance. They celebrated children's achievements, comforted grieving families, and worked side by side during charity events. Trust grew quietly, just as strong trees grow without making noise. One warm spring afternoon, nearly 2 years after that unforgettable cafe meeting, Maris looked at both of them while planting flowers outside the community center. She smiled with the innocent certainty only children possess. She said life had finally stopped looking lonely. Neither adult answered immediately. Instead, they simply smiled. Because sometimes happiness does not arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it arrives carrying school backpacks, lunchboxes, muddy work boots, and gentle conversations over ordinary breakfasts. The joke about becoming a bride had never been about romance. It had been about reminding two wounded hearts that life still held room for unexpected beginnings. If this story touched your heart, please write, "Kindness always finds a way," in the comments before we reach the end. Your words may encourage someone silently carrying burdens they never speak about. As the golden afternoon sun painted the community center in warm light, families laughed across the playground built by helping hands rather than selfish ambition. Children ran freely where broken walls had once stood. Parents smiled with renewed hope. And standing quietly near the entrance were two people whose lives had changed not because of wealth, luck, or perfect timing, but because one ordinary joke opened the door to extraordinary compassion. Their journey reminded everyone present that true love begins with respect, true success begins with kindness, and the greatest miracles often start with a simple smile shared between strangers. If this story warmed your heart, please like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to HeartNest Tales so together we can continue spreading stories that remind the world that kindness is never wasted and hope is never truly lost.